our press secretary, gave alternative facts to that.
My goal in this deposition was to be truthful, but not particularly helpful.
Welcome to Unspun, the podcast that makes you better at finding the truth. The way people get news is changing. It used to be that there were many reporters who would research stories and write articles, but now politicians and famous people share information directly with you on social media and the internet. That means you find out things fast, but it's up to you to make sure the information's actually accurate. And newsmakers don't always do their part. The temptation to manipulate information is strong. They bend the truth to deceive so that they can avoid accountability, so that they can advance their agendas. When you recognize these agendas, you can sometimes find out what's real. And we're at a crossroads where anyone can share anything online, so it's important to sharpen your critical thinking skills. Finding that deception before it goes viral is pretty much a survival skill now, and we're going to do it together. Let's get unspun. Hello, truth seekers, and welcome to this week's Unspun. I'm really glad to be back in your ears this week. Before we get started, I did want to shout out Clayton, who took his time to write to me with a suggestion for a topic for a future episode. I so appreciate hearing from you guys, and I love your ideas and feedback anytime at TheUnspunPodcast@gmail.com. In today's episode, we're going to look at how one type of media, social media, can change people's minds or even radicalize them. Sound good? Let's get unspun. In 2017, people in northern England were shocked when a suicide bomber detonated a homemade bomb outside of Manchester Arena at the end of an Ariana Grande concert. And the attack killed 22 people, and it injured more than 200 others. 6 years later, just last year, an inquiry found that officials had enough knowledge to know that the attacker had a relationship with a jailed militant, and that it concluded that they should have referred him to a de-radicalization program. And then just last month, a threat of a massive stadium attack made Taylor Swift's promoter cancel her Eras Tour concerts in Vienna. Can you imagine what a hard call that was? People who were lucky enough to get tickets disappointed at the last minute, and those hotels and restaurants who were planning on a big profit from the event suddenly just ghosted. Police questioned 3 teenagers, and they found explosives and detonators at one of their homes, along with extensive ISIS propaganda. And the country's interior minister said the teens were, quote, radicalized by the internet. Today, we're diving into a topic that's been making headlines around the world: the impact of social media algorithms, particularly when it comes to extremist content and radicalization. And it's been in the news quite a bit. Just recently, Brazil actually banned the social media platform X, saying there were pieces of content that the platform promoted that were false, that they were defamatory, or maybe even threatening toward Brazil's Supreme Court justices. Social media platforms are getting tough looks all over the world for their role in shaping what the public talks about and even for amplifying that harmful content. And so, kind of with that context in mind, I wanted to explore what researchers have discovered about how social media algorithms work, how they affect users, and we're going to be looking at studies on major platforms like YouTube and TikTok, and looking at how those algorithms might lead to radicalization. But let's start by understanding what we mean when we talk about algorithms. Social media platforms use sophisticated sets of rules to decide what content you should see, hoping to show you what you want so that you stay around a while and you see more ads. These algorithms look at data on how you've acted in the past, what you've looked at and how long you've looked at it for, and in some cases you've even filled out preference surveys too. And all that data gets used to recommend videos, posts, or accounts that they think are going to keep you clicking and watching the next thing. So there was a study called Algorithmic Extremism, examining YouTube's rabbit hole of radicalization, and it looked into how YouTube's system for recommending what video to watch next might lead to increasingly extreme content. The researchers, they looked at those recommended videos, and they also used what they call social network analysis. So this helps you to map out how the people who interact with videos are connected to each other. This study, as well as others that I looked at, suggests that while algorithms don't make extremist content, they can make you see it. Maybe they repeatedly recommend similar things, or they go on to suggest ever more extreme versions of whatever it is you've already looked at. One crucial thing is understanding how users, particularly young people, perceive and interact with these algorithms. And a Dutch researcher interviewed teenagers and young adults, and she asked them to talk out loud about algorithms while they use social media sites. And here's what she found. Even in her relatively small sample, the understanding of algorithms varied a lot between the people, and some didn't even have the language to describe how it might be affecting them. So, this suggests a need for digital literacy and for better education about how these platforms work. And then just this week, the BBC's Mariana Spring published a piece where she interviewed several young men who described some of the effects of YouTube's recommendations on their feeds. Here's a part of the article. An interviewee, quote, told the BBC he tried to use one of Instagram's tools and a similar one on TikTok to say he was not interested in violent or misogynistic content, but he says he continued to be recommended it. He is interested in UFC, the Ultimate Fighting Championship. He also found himself watching videos from controversial influencers when they were sent his way, but he said he did not want to be recommended this more extreme content. Quote, you get the picture in your head and you can't get it out, stains your brain, and so you think about it the rest of the day, he says. End of the quote. Now let's take a closer look. While you're endlessly doom scrolling, social media algorithms might be creating echo chambers of information. But they're not the same for everyone. Studies suggest that while some users might find themselves in algorithmic rabbit holes of extreme increasing content, others might be exposed to a variety of viewpoints. The youth that the BBC interviewed said that his friends who were girls were getting recommended different videos about music and makeup. And this just goes to show you that algorithmic influence is complex, and this makes it really hard to even study effectively. And it's not just the algorithms. Users are active in this process too. You teach the algorithms by interacting with content, by choosing search terms, and some really savvy users deliberately try to train the algorithm to show them certain kinds of content. So, this is a whole other layer of complexity. If the algorithm gives you some limited control, it also means that, if you're drawn to that more extreme content, you can find yourself in an echo chamber that you helped to make for yourself, just reinforced by the platform's algorithm. I need to take a quick break, but when I come back, we'll explore how these algorithmic influences might disproportionately affect some different groups. We'll also look at some of the challenges researchers face when studying this. I'll be right back. Welcome back. One study I looked at specifically examined gender differences when it comes to online radicalization, and the researchers found that there are indeed distinct patterns in how men and women engage with this kind of online stuff. It suggests that men and women may be drawn to different kinds of extremist ideology, and maybe they express their views in different ways on social media platforms. The gender differences in online radicalization matter when you think about how algorithms could be tailored to different kinds of users. Maybe recommendation systems could amplify these differences, leading to different radicalization pathways for men and for women. And in fact, one study that looked at comments on radical content found that it was the women who were the more extreme and the less tolerant. And there can be real-world consequences. It doesn't even have to get to the level of canceling Taylor Swift. Remember that social media doesn't exist in a vacuum. There's real-world social, economic, and political factors that contribute to radicalization as well. Like that bomber at the Ariana Grande concert knew radicals in real life too. So these algorithms could amplify or accelerate these processes, but they're not the sole cause. And algorithms aren't in themselves bad. Could you imagine trying to handle all the incoming opinions and shares from all of the people that you follow on TikTok or Instagram? Sussing out the stuff you want is, in a lot of ways, a service to you. So what do we do with this? How do we reduce those negative impacts while still benefiting from personalized content? I really wish research had a clear answer to that. But like I said, the issue just shows up in a context. You might think it would be great if platforms just screened out that kind of stuff. And according to that BBC article, platforms do try. They use a combination of AI detection and user reporting, and they even employ people. TikTok told them it has 40,000 people screening content. And as an aside, that sounds like a just terrible job. Can you imagine spending all day watching the most heinous things on the internet? It's pretty easy for this kind of screening to raise concerns in another direction, too, excessive or inappropriate censorship. It's the same kind of questions we've seen around books in school libraries, where one group sees content about sexuality as inappropriate for the context, another sees content about Christians as problematic indoctrination. So, the studies that I've examined don't really provide definitive solutions, but there are a few helpful insights. The study with the Dutch youths found that they had really different levels of understanding, and improving understanding could be part of the solution. Users could know that when they get the convenience of suggestions that they like, they're giving up some perspectives in favor of a whole lot of what they want. I think of it like cupcakes. Cupcakes are delicious, and I want to eat them. But if I have an all-cupcake diet, I'm going to be pretty unhealthy at some point. So maybe digital literacy is part of the answer, helping users understand how algorithms work and how they might influence the content they see. This can empower people to engage more critically with the platforms where they get their news and information. And maybe you can all help by pointing out when people that you know are being willfully blind. If they say they only follow content creators who tell them things they already agree with, for example. And there's certainly a role for platforms, too. Platforms could modify their recommendation systems to reduce the likelihood of users being led down rabbit holes of increasingly extreme content. This is fraught in a couple of ways, though. What constitutes extreme content can be subjective, and it changes depending on who is influencing the conversations. Some researchers suggest that diversifying what's recommended could help break those echo chambers. So if you're exposed to a wider range of viewpoints, it might reduce the risk of becoming isolated in bubbles of extreme content. But it's really not clear how you do that without overwhelming your users with too much information. It's also worth considering transparency. If platforms were more open about how their algorithms work, it could potentially help users understand and regulate their behavior, and it could help governments and even industry groups do effective regulation too. But this needs to be balanced against concerns about privacy and the potential to teach bad actors how to game the system. Even more important, doing this isn't necessarily in the best interests of the platform. A company like Meta or Google isn't actually a public good with a mission to make the world a better place. It's a for-profit business that exists to make money, and keeping you slack-jawed and scrolling is how they do that. They don't want to be transparent because they lose their competitive advantage. They don't want to diversify your feed because you're more likely to put your phone away, and where's the profit in that? So what you see right now is an effort from platforms to protect their profits while they're doing just enough to placate whoever is bothering them about how they're operating today. And that's why you'll see the heads of social media companies promising to fight misinformation under pressure from one group, and then stating that they've overdone the censorship under pressure from another. So, well, it's complicated. We know the relationship between social media algorithms and online radicalization is multifaceted. And while algorithms can amplify or accelerate radicalization, they're not to blame for all of it. Addressing these challenges is going to really probably require a combination of technology and policy and education. But we know that it's useful for you to work at being an informed and critically engaged user. So as we collect inside our filter bubbles with like-minded people, maybe we can take the risk to remind each other that there's a bigger world out there. Thanks for getting unspun with me this week. Unspun is a production of me, Amanda Sturgill, and is a proud member of the MSW Media family of podcasts. Send me your thoughts and ideas about trickery in the news on Gmail at TheUnspunPodcast@gmail.com. I even write back. And find this episode's show notes and more information at TheUnspunPodcast.substack.com. Want to learn more and get smarter? Check out my book, Detecting Deception: Tools to Fight Fake News, which is available on Amazon or your favorite online bookseller. And until next time, stay sharp, everyone.